That is the cry of a church that wants to die. That's not the way we do it here.
If a pastor hasn't considered quitting at a church, then I wonder, is he really preaching the gospel?
Do we have to disclose identities in this podcast?
We don't have to.
Oh.
Relationship is never built in rows. So in the auditorium, it's set not to build relationship.
Right.
Relationship is built around the table.
Yeah.
I said, well, our church, and before I even finished, he collapsed on the ground sobbing. And I said, what's going on? And he said, I have a gun over there. And I was about to kill myself. And I was sitting here praying, God, if there's another way, send me a sign. And so I sat there with this man for quite a while until his family and stuff got there. And he just kept saying, he heard me, he answered me.
Frankly, we've got a lot of lukewarm people in our churches.
You can't be a follower of Jesus Christ and say, I know what you said, Jesus, but I prefer to believe, but that's kind of where we are.
Yeah.
I mean, I beg God to take the desire to pastor away.
One of my favorite Hendricks quotes, Howard Hendricks, is, not Jimmy, you can impress somebody at a distance, but you can only impact them up close.
God can handle the big questions.
Hi, I'm Chris McNeil, and this is Ministry on the Move, a journey podcast interviewing pastors and ministers across the country. As the father of the McNeils, I get to travel all across this land singing the gospel, and one day it dawned on me that I was already having great conversations with pastors. And then came the conviction that maybe I should hit the record button and share these inspiring, insightful, and hopeful conversations with you. Join me on a journey to churches of all shapes and sizes, different parts of the country, and see just what it takes to shepherd the body of Christ. For more information on the McNeils, you can visit us at mcneilmusic.tv or mcneilmusic.com, or follow us on Facebook at The McNeils with 2 L's. Thanks for joining us, and here's the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to Ministry on the Move. I'm your host, Chris McNeil. It has been a hot minute since we've had conversation together, and I think I'm going to take a little while and maybe use this as its own episode even, to sort of catch you guys up and just, take a run at pulling back the curtain a little bit and letting you guys know what's been going on in our lives. No major things, nothing shocking or amazing. But when I first started this podcast in March, I chose to put 10 interviews sort of in the hopper, as it were, with the idea that there are going to be some weeks where we can't load in and out and get to the next concert on time, let alone me sit down and interview a pastor. A lot of times our Sundays are incredibly busy. And so one of the things I've sort of done to combat that, I really want to try and make the podcast's timing predictable. I want you to be able to expect it on a Monday morning. And so I've typically done interviews that are about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 in length, that I can carve up into 2 episodes. And so when I get a guy to sit down and talk with me about ministry, I can carve those up into 2 episodes, right? And so one goes on Monday and one goes a week from Monday. The idea being that on average, I can't do an episode a week, it seems like. And now, with that said, I do have probably another 10 episodes that I've got in the hopper at this point that are waiting. They're waiting for me to edit. And so as we came into the Thanksgiving holidays this year, I just ran out of time, and so we left the week before Thanksgiving, and we did a video shoot in Nashville. And as of today, the day I'm recording this is New Year's Eve of 2024, and tomorrow on the 1st, we're going to release the first video that we shot, and we're really excited about that. But anyway, we ran up to Nashville, and then from there we had concerts in Indiana, had Thanksgiving with family, and let me just stop there. I should also mention that so in trying to get out the door, in trying to get to our dates, I ran out of time. And so I was gone from the house for 2 weeks, where I knew that there were not going to be any podcasts. I just didn't have time. They weren't edited. And so I knew that I was kind of going into dry dock for a time. And it's been good for me because I've had about, 6 weeks. You've probably only experienced 4 of them, maybe 5. And my apologies for that, but it's been good for me. Time to just sort of take stock and reevaluate. Time to kind of rest. We've had Christmas since then. But then there was this other event that happened right before Thanksgiving, and that's really weighed heavily on my mind. Bob Wilkins was a pastor friend of ours. We met Bob because he did my wife's grandfather's funeral as his first funeral as the pastor in Clay City, Indiana. And I was really, really impressed with Bob when I met him, and have only become more so the longer I got to know him over the years. We buried my wife's grandfather, John, in 2014. And Bob was there. And as it turns out, Bob had a pretty sketchy past. He did not come to the Lord until I think he was 50 or maybe a little bit older than that. He did not enter the ministry until he was in his late 50s, after he spent time in a seminary that, interestingly, is known somewhat for being liberal in its theology. I've never really wanted this to become a political show, and I'll try and stay away from that as best I can. But theologically, the seminary that he admitted this, the seminary that he graduated from was quite liberal, and to the point that at one point, Bob told me that he went to a state meeting and counted the number of times that the name Jesus was said during the state meeting, denominational meeting, and the number of times that George Floyd was shared at the same meeting, and it was really out of whack. He said it maybe 3 times for Jesus and probably over 100 for George Floyd. And yet, in spite of that, Bob Wilkins was an amazing pastor. He was rough around the edges. In fact, I think one time, I think at one time, if I remember the story correctly, he let a cuss word slip from the pulpit, and and was gotten onto by his congregation, right? And that's not exactly what I would think of as appropriate, but it was who he was, and it was where he emanated from. Bob had run off and joined the circus when he was a young man, and he one time told me sort of a little bit of his backstory. And I'm going somewhere with this. He said that he wasn't interested in getting people to play the games that were going to spend $2 or $3. It was his job to get guys to get so frustrated with the game that they went home and got their mattress money, $2,000 or $3,000, and he would shark them out of that. He was repentant of it, make no mistake, but he was willing to admit and to fess up. The Lord saved him out of that. He was born in 1955. He ran away with the carnival and then enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. He was stationed in California and Japan. He worked as a carpenter. He managed small hotels. And then the Lord got a hold of him. And I have never seen someone like Bob. I've never met anyone like this man. Bob was diagnosed with cancer some 5 years ago and smiled the entire way through. Not because he thought he was going to cheat it, even though he did. He, through some crazy treatments, he prolonged his life for about 4 years. They thought they had it, then it came back. And in fact, it came back with a vengeance. The last funeral that he preached in Indiana was my wife Michelle's grandmother's funeral. And so it was a sweet time, that a sweet memory, that his first funeral was Michelle's granddad and the last one was her grandmother. And I remember him coming over to the house at times when Alta was convalescing. My grandmother-in-law was convalescing, and she was in bed in the living room, and she just really didn't get out of bed much during those days. And Bob would come over on his Harley with his wife to serve communion. And he brought the communion elements in a Crown Royal sack, which was just Bob. He was never going to lose sight of where he had come from. But he knew whose he was and where he was going. And even in the face of cancer, he was joyful. He told me one time, he said, "Chris, I'm not afraid of being dead. I'm just afraid of dying." I thought that was brilliant. Bob knew, there's never been a transformation in the pastorate, in my mind, not the ones that I've seen, like Bob. Bob lost his battle, though, in November of this year. And one of the sad things about this podcast was I had always intended to get Bob on here. And it's just not going to happen this side of heaven. If you wish, you can pray for his sweet wife, Donna, who is still at the church. They moved to Wisconsin for the last year and a half of his life, where they could be close to the hospitals that were doing the treatments for his cancer in Chicago and close to their home. And she's still there at the church. And Bob preached up until I think the last 2 weeks of his life. I will tell you guys something. The kingdom of heaven is better, and the kingdom of earth is worse for having lost a servant named Bob Wilkins. Bob was one of the guys that reminded me every time I saw him that the joy of the Lord was his strength. And I'm so grateful to have known that man. And I tell you, that was something of a gut punch to me to watch him go through that time. It happened very quickly. And I texted him about 3 days before he passed away and never got a response. I will see him again. I know where he is. He not unlike the Apostle Paul, knew what he had been saved from and knew what he had been saved to and knew what he was, and he knew whose he was. And thinking of how I should honor him took me 3 or 4 weeks, I think, before I finally decided to sit down and record this little mini episode or whatever it turns out to be. May we all be a Bob Wilkins, knowing what the Lord has rescued us from, knowing what he's rescued us to, and unwaveringly pointing others to the hope and faith that we have in Jesus Christ. Bob was an inspiration, motorcycle and all, curse words and all, Crown Royal bag and all. And may he rest in peace. We spent Thanksgiving in Indiana and drove back, and our busiest time of year is at Christmas. I don't know why, but that's just the way the Lord's worked it out for the last 3 or 5 years, that we have more shows, more services, more concerts from the day after Thanksgiving up until Christmas Eve than at any time of year. And they're booked sooner than any other time of year for us. They're always the first ones to go. And so we have been on a whirlwind pace, and we finally, I think we ended up finishing up on December the 22nd this year. And our family celebrates Christmas like everything we do, large style. We celebrate it on the 24th, and every child gives every person in our family a gift. And so with 10 kids and 12 of us in our family, plus we now have son-in-law, we have grandson number 1, son-in-law number 1, potential son-in-law number 2 was there. And so you kind of get the picture. It becomes an all-day event. We do stockings, and then we cook breakfast, and then we come back and unwrap presents, and then it's the next day, right? So and then on Christmas we're either with family or we just sort of have Christmas Day hangover, and we, all the kids play with their presents, and we kind of lay on the couch and debate whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie or not. And so that kind of catches you up to why the podcasts have not been regular. Tomorrow, I don't know that I finished this story earlier, but tomorrow we will release the first video. And so I hope you're able, from our new album. The new album is entitled I Am Convinced. It is not quite out on iTunes yet, but you can, if you come see us in concert, we've got the album. We're very, very excited about it. This is our 8th album, and really pleased at the way that this one has turned out. And so we actually went to Nashville and shot video for 2 of the songs. The first one is That Same God, and Kaylee wrote that one, and we're really excited about that. That will be our first release to radio. But if at the airing of this, you can probably just go to our Facebook page and see it there. Watch the video and hear the song. So now on Saturday, the 4th of January, we start back up. We're done with Christmas, and we'll start our concert season. And coincidentally, the I Am Convinced album, support for that, will start on Saturday, January the 4th. The 4th and 5th, actually. We're in our hometown, Bonham, those days. And then we're down in Rockport, Texas on the 10th and 11th at the Rockport Gospel Music Festival. And then on Sunday morning, the 12th, we are at Cal Allen Baptist Church right outside of Corpus Christi, Texas. And then that night, we're at Temple of Praise back in Rockport. So it's a big couple of weeks coming up for us, and we're hitting the ground running. And so I've got interviews to get caught up on and things of that nature. But I did want to catch you guys up. I also want to tell you thank you for those of you whom I have met on the road that have said, you know what, I'm listening to the podcast and I really enjoy it. I do appreciate that. That is something that helps keep me going, is that feedback. It is difficult to do. I do it because I felt like the Lord has called me to do it. I don't do it for man's reward, but just knowing that there are people out there who are listening, and providing feedback. I'm eternally grateful for it. And Andy, you make sure your son listens to the tail end of this podcast, all right? Because that was a great encouragement, you and your son, and I really do appreciate that. So this was long-winded, and I think that I'm probably going to release that as just a bonus content, maybe a Happy New Year's Day, and then I've got some others that will start dropping at the first on Monday the 6th is my target to get back in the swing of things, and I'm going to call that season 2. And I think going forward that may be a really good way for me to do this, is to continue releasing them on Mondays. I want to keep that cadence up, but I think I need the downtime from Thanksgiving to New Year, just to rewind, unwind, dewind. I don't know. Find myself, to rest. That's what it is. I need a sabbatical or a Sabbath every once in a blue moon. So thank you for your support. Thank you for listening to the McNeils. Thank you for listening to Our Heart. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for coming to our concerts. I pray that you guys have a Merry Christmas, have had a Merry Christmas, and that the Lord is moving in your life. I tell you, we're looking at 25 tomorrow. Yeah, we start 2025 tomorrow, and I used to think, oh, it can get better, and it didn't seem like it did. And then the next year, you'd say, oh, it'll be the best year ever. It'll be better. And maybe not. But the Lord is still on his throne, and you still have work to do, and I still have work to do, and we still have work to do. And so it's time to gird up our loins, answer the world like a man, steady ourselves to be answered by God if we have questions, but to know that you are still loved and a necessary part of the kingdom. And maybe not necessary is a bad word, isn't it? You're not necessary. I'm not necessary. God could do this without us, and yet he chooses to do it with us. This is a partnership. He wants a family, and he wants you to be a part of it. And that's the gospel message, isn't it? Not that you were a drug addict and now you're not, but that you are part of a family, and God wants you to come back home. That is a message of hope that the world needs to hear. Now more than ever, he needs to hear it, that they need to hear his message through you, as was, I think, erroneously attributed to St. Augustine, using words if necessary, predominantly with our lives. God bless you guys. Happy New Year, and we will see you soon. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Ministry on the Move. I've been your host, Chris McNeil. If you hear this on January the 1st, I hope that you will follow us tonight at 6 o'clock Central on Facebook, showing off one of the new songs from our latest album. Follow us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, give us a like, a share, subscribe. That's the way that this gets spread, and you energize me. And email me at chris@mcneilmusic. God bless you. We will talk to you soon. More coming your way. This podcast is so holy, even our bathroom is holy. We have 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John.